We can start. Perfect. Hello, everyone. I cannot believe we are at our last session of this absolutely incredible conference. It has been just, I have, cried and like somehow even laughed today. Like it's been truly incredible. And I'm so thankful for all of the scholars, all of the cultural heritage stewards, the civic workers that have been sharing their information with us today and all of their hard work. So for our last session, we have one of our attendees could not, one of our presenters could not make it, but we have three absolutely incredible topics, and I'm so excited. So we are going to start with Kaitlyn Griffith, who is an archivist, oral historian, and educator, who will be presenting Digitizing Resistance, Decolonial Praxis, and the Politics of Digital Preservation in Chicago's Community Archives. Kaitlyn, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the organizers of this conference for allowing me to be a part of it. It's been really wonderful to be able to learn so much from this global scholarly community. Are we able to go back one slide? Wonderful, thank you. So my name is Kaitlyn Griffith. I'm an archivist and instructor from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. And oops, sorry, I want to explore how community archives in Chicago, archives that are rooted in Puerto Rican, Black, and queer communities, mobilize digital preservation as a decolonial strategy to contest erasure. The tagline of our conference, Protecting Heritage, Memory, and Land in Palestine and Lebanon, offers a framework that resonates deeply with each of the projects that I'll share. At the core of each of them is a struggle over who gets to narrate their own past, whose stories survive, and how communities assert their right to memory in places where land, culture, and identity remain contested. Although Chicago is far from the Levant, the dynamics of displacement, policing, gentrification, and state control echo across borders. And communities respond, creatively and collectively, by building their own infrastructures of memory. What I want to show today is that in the global north, too, the fight against occupation and erasure is real, and digital preservation can become a tool of resistance. Next slide, please. When we think of archives at risk, we rightfully often think of conflict zones, targeted destruction, or the systemic dismantling of cultural memory. But communities across the US face parallel threats. Gentrification that displaces people from their historic neighborhoods, policing that criminalizes cultural production, and institutions that overlook, misrepresent, or extract stories for their own benefit. Community archives arise as a response, not simply to save heritage, but to protect the continuity of relationships, identities, and collective struggles. They offer alternative infrastructures of memory that privilege community epistemologies over institutional authority. The three projects that I'll share with you today all position digitization, metadata creation, and digital curation not merely as technical tasks, but as expressions of self-determination. They demonstrate that preserving community memory is in itself a political act, one that aligns with global efforts to resist cultural erasure. Next slide, please. In our first case study, we're going to be looking at the Puerto Rican Cultural Center's Digitizing the Barrio project. For those who may not know, barrio is the Spanish word for neighborhood. The Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Chicago is located in the Humboldt Park neighborhood in what has long been known as Paseo Boricua. Two giant steel Puerto Rican flags mark the stretch of Division Street that has anchored Puerto Rican life in Chicago for generations. The PRCC was founded in 1973 in the wake of the 1966 Division Street uprising, when residents mobilized around poverty, displacement, and institutional neglect. From its inception, the PRCC positioned cultural survival alongside political organizing, education, and public health. In 2023, the center launched Digitizing the Barrio, an effort to gather, accession, and digitize a community-controlled archive. Materials came from everywhere: community offices, personal collections, school basements, attics, storage units, all to reflect decades of community and activism. Among the most significant collections are materials connected to the Puerto Rican Liberation Organization Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, or the FALN, and the campaign to free Puerto Rican political prisoners connected to the FALN, especially Oscar Lopez Rivera, who served more than 35 years in federal prisons for his political activities. The image in the bottom left corner are actually court illustrations from proceedings where Oscar Lopez Rivera, who's in the bottom middle, and his fellow political detainees were tried. Letters written from inside, pamphlets distributed across the diaspora, press releases, newsletters, and personal correspondence form a body of evidence that simply does not exist anywhere else. By design, this history lives with the community that made it, as it has for decades. The PRCC has employed political prisoners of the FALN upon release, treating them as an indispensable piece of their operation. The PRCC has always drawn a direct line between cultural preservation and land, between maintaining archives and maintaining a claim to the neighborhood space amid aggressive gentrification. Digitizing the barrio is therefore not a neutral preservation project. It is a strategy of territorial memory, an assertion that diasporic Puerto Ricans belong to the city blocks they built and defended. Digitizing the barrio is committed to making community memory accessible by digitizing everything: photographs, newspapers, organizational papers, oral histories, and building an infrastructure that democratizes access without compromising community ownership. This vision of full digitization is not about technological enthusiasm, it's about sovereignty. When communities can access their own materials without relying on distant institutions, they can narrate themselves more fully. The relevance to Palestine and Lebanon is clear. Communities under threat safeguard archives not only to remember the past, but to assert a future. To say, we were here, we are here, and we will remain. Also, an additional note, you'll see in the bottom right picture a newspaper regularly produced by the Puerto Rican Cultural Center for many years with an article advocating for a free Palestine. There is so much solidarity material in the Puerto Rican Cultural Center's archive that there is a sub-series unto itself about solidarity between Palestine and Puerto Rico. Next slide, please. The second project approaches memory through sound. Free 'em All Radio, a weekly live broadcast call-in program hosted by Chairman Dr. Fred Hampton Jr. of the Black Panther Party Cubs and Robin Yvette Allan, also known as the Lady of Rage. Since 2016, the show has been a space where the Black community narrates itself directly and without mediation. Every Wednesday night, callers discuss everything from breaking news to police brutality, racism in institutions, community events, mutual aid efforts, small businesses, new music, and court cases that rarely receive public attention. But perhaps most importantly, people call from inside jails and prisons across the United States, reporting conditions, organizing strategies, and political repression from behind bars. During COVID, these firsthand testimonies became crucial, an unparalleled primary source record of what was happening inside U.S. prisons. No journalist, no state agency, and no academic institution could have captured what incarcerated people reported through Free 'em All Radio in real time. This is precisely why Free 'em All Radio must be preserved, but it's also why it is extremely fragile. Like all podcasts, the show is born digital, but not yet digitally secure. For years, the program's previous website hosted its full back catalog until it collapsed, taking every recording with it. Today, the show exists primarily as live streams on YouTube and Instagram, which is not a preservation strategy, it is a contingency plan. Platforms can delete content, algorithms may deprioritize it, and a single change in the terms of service can wipe out years of community history. This is one reason that I supervise Dominican University students that you can see in the picture on the left in creating a digital finding aid for the program to create metadata, descriptions, and points of entry that can survive platform failures, allowing the archive's interpretive framework to endure even if live stream files do not. Equally important is developing summaries, timestamps, and subject tags so researchers can navigate this body of knowledge. Dominican University does not own these recordings. There is no custodial claim. This is a post-custodial relationship where the university contributes labor and technology without extracting authority. This project resonates with Palestine and Lebanon, not abstractly, but concretely. The political centrality of prisoners, the role of prison writing and testimony in liberation movements, and the need to document state violence as it happens. The U.S. archives have long excluded or criminalized the voices of those who resist. Free Mall Radio allows communities to document themselves and to counter narratives told about them by institutions invested in their silence. Next slide, please. Our third case study has to do with Dorothy and the Gerber Hart Library and Archive. Gerber Hart was founded in Chicago in 1981 and is one of the largest LGBTQ+ libraries and archives in the Midwest. It is a community archive and has been since 1981, not affiliated with the university or the state, and is dedicated to preserving queer life, creativity, and activism. In 2024, I assembled a volunteer videography team to create a new collection documenting Dorothy, a beloved Chicago lesbian bar known for its vibrant calendar of performances, music, drag, theater, poetry, comedy, and open mic nights. Dorothy is a cultural ecosystem, especially for women, trans, and non-binary performers, and is a space where people build family, identity, and support networks. Historically, queer nightlife has been a cornerstone of community memory, especially as queerness was and has been criminalized, stigmatized, or forced underground in the United States. But institutional archives rarely preserve nightlife, performance, or everyday queer life. And when the record is thin, the absence is weaponized. Some claim queer and trans people didn't exist in the past, that gender diversity is foreign, or that queerness is a Western invention. These arguments rely on the destruction, neglect, and non-existence of the archives. By actively recording live performances at Dorothy, we push back against this erasure. We document creative expression, relationships, and joy, not as ephemera, but as historical testimony. And because this work is housed at Gerber Hart, the community controls the pace, purpose, and ethics of the project. It's an example of how marginalized communities build their own archives when institutions fail or actively refuse to represent them. Importantly, all of this work is born digital. The collection exists primarily as high-resolution video files with some photographs and very little physical ephemera. Increasingly, community archives will have to center born digital materials, especially video, because everyone now carries an archival device in our pocket. Whether for better or for worse, we are all citizen journalists and citizen archivists. This means we need to develop robust, community-centered digital workflows, file ingests, checksums, metadata creation, access copies, and strategies for long-term digital preservation outside of our institutional structures. Our volunteer team learned through doing. Because preservation was always the goal, this project became simultaneously a training ground. Next slide, please. Across these three Chicago case studies, a common thread emerges. Digitization becomes a tool of resistance, not simply a technical service. Community archives push back against state violence, gentrification, and carceral logic, homophobia, colonial narratives, and institutional extraction. What unites Chicago's barrio archivists, prison radio networks, and queer nightlife preservationists with the struggles of Palestine and Lebanon is not geography, but the shared understanding that heritage, memory, and land are always political. They are contested, they are vulnerable, and they survive because communities fight for them. The stories we preserve shape the futures we insist on. Digitizing resistance is not only about safeguarding the past, it's about building the conditions for liberation in the present and the future. Thank you so much.
Kaitlyn, that was absolutely incredible. I just kept writing down quotes as you were saying things because I was like, I want. So I told Dr. Khader that we need to put out like a proceedings of this conference, but at least, so because but at least I will be making my students watch so many of these presentations. So if it's okay with you and the other presenters, let's do questions at the end after everyone presents. All right. So next, um, we have Dr. Shahd Qzeih, and is Professor Ipek Türeli as well presenting with you?
I'll be presenting on behalf of the group.
Wonderful. All right. So, Dr. Shahd Qzeih is Assistant Professor of Architecture at the Arab American University of Palestine. And her research is on how memory, place, and displacement shape identity in context of exile. Her presentation is titled Resilient Archives and Living Memory, Community-Based Preservation in Palestine and Beyond. And she's presenting on behalf of herself, Professor Diana Allan, and Professor Ipek Türeli. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just opening up this opportunity for us to present or talk about our project. I'll start right away with my presentation. So yes, I'll be talking today about the topic is resilient archives and living memory, community-based preservation in Palestine and beyond, with a focus on a research project titled Echoes of Home, Place, Memory, and Identity in the Nakba Archive. The work I would present today draws on oral history collections produced by the Nakba Archive in Lebanon and preserved in the Palestinian Oral History Archive at the American University of Beirut, which contains more than 1,000 hours of testimonies with first generation Palestinians and other Palestinian communities in Lebanon. This research also sits within a broader collaboration supported by the Palestinian Quebec Science Bridge that connects the Palestinian researchers with the Quebec researchers, North America and Canadian institutions through short research visits and joint projects. And that resulted with this project in collaboration with both Prof. Allan and Prof. Türeli. What I want to talk about today or show today is how these archives can be read as living infrastructure of memory and how we use them as a field for studying place attachment in extended exile. I'd like to begin by widening the lens for a moment. So, according to the UNHCR global trends and mid-year reports, the number of forcibly displaced people worldwide have reached around 110 million by mid-2023, and it continues to rise, including refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons. And behind that number are very different histories and geographies of laws, wars, settled colonialism, climate disasters, and political persecution. I want you to see it, to see what they said as a backdrop to that presentation, a global displacement landscape in which Palestinian refugees are just one case, but particularly long and politically charged one. My entire point into this landscape is question how people keep the sense of home alive when the physical place is destroyed, inaccessible, or threatened. And so it's a different kind of story, let's say, a different kind of perspective where we look at the landscape of displacement, and it's a continuous journey that we've started before on studying the refugee camps, and then it developed and continued with grew up actually with that research. So rather than focusing only on legal status on the CAB statistics, um, we move to look at the stories of these people, stories told by the Palestinian elders in the refugee camps in Lebanon about the houses they lived in before 1948. So we look at the archival data collected, and we try to analyze them somehow. And that was a question raised by uh, my colleague actually in the research, Prof. Ipek. We collect the archival data. Then what do we do with them? And partially that was an experiment study, like we revisit the data we collected and we use it for research purpose somehow. So we revisited this data and we selected, and gradually through the presentation I'll tell you what we did exactly. We were interested on how people narrate the place, how they speak about home, villages, camps, and how those narratives are captured and recycled and circulated through the community-based archive. So I'll ground this more specifically in the Palestinian case and in the events of the 1948, the Nakba, the catastrophe, which refers to the mass displacement and disposition of the Palestinians during the creation of the Israeli state. And at that period, roughly 750,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled from their homes, and around 530 villages were depleted or destroyed. And those who ended up in the Lebanese camps, let's say the Palestinians in the Lebanese refugee camps, are the Palestinians who were recorded with, and we have their testimonies in the website. And they have detailed memories of houses, streets, fields, and villages and as landmarks. The central question was how do the displaced Palestinians narrate the home and place even in their exile, and how the oral histories recorded by the community-based archives, and what does that tell us about the identity and belonging in the extended exile. So Edward Said, actually, I found that Edward Said a formulation of exile very helpful all the time. And what he says is that he reminds us that exile is not only about the physical separation from homeland, it is also about the continuous tension between attachment and integrating. Sorry. So for Palestinians, the tension is spatial between the lost village and the refugee camp, between the map of Palestine and the concrete allays of the camp in Lebanon. So we look at how the tension was negotiated and narrated in those testimonies. The main aim was to analyze how the first generation of the Palestinian refugees, in the refugee camps, recall the place of origin, and we looked at how they refer to those places, how the displacement and the journey is into exile was narrated, especially and emotionally, in which simple emotions and sensory details functions as anchors of place attachment and identity in exile. I want to show you actually all the data we refer to and we studied is available on two different websites. One is the Nakba Archive, and the whole collection is hosted by the American University of the American University in Beirut in Lebanon, and it's a grassroots oral history collective found in 2002 in Lebanon. In that website, there are 800 interviews recorded with the first generation Palestinian refugee camp residents, and it is a digital platform, and it has recordings and it has videos of those testimonies. That's let's say the interface of the website. I can show you also the website in here. I will post the link as well. You can see it's hosted in here, and in here you can see the videos. And they are classified based on from where these refugees were expelled and where they reside. Back to the presentation. The conceptual frame adapted was from a prior study I did through my PhD, and it was on two different refugee camps in the West Bank area, but it targeted three different generations of refugees residing in the camps. That led to that conclusion, that framework, and I wanted to test that framework with the first generation refugees who in the camps. It was really hard to find them back then when I did the study 2022, let's say, because most of them died, and that raises the importance of recording those testimonies with the first generation refugees. It looks at the place meaning in four different angles. What kind of concepts did the refugees use, and what kind of symbols they refer to, and what kind of emotions they expressed, and what kind of collective histories, how personal stories are woven into the broader Nakba and exile narratives. And we had also applied sensory spatial memory, let's say checklist, and sensory and embodied memory, smells, sounds, textures, and daily routines and gestures. And that is the framework, mainly centered and focused on these four dimensions in addition to the other checklists. And methodologically, we've moved from video to thematic cluster. We did close viewing and detailed transcription and annotation of each testimony, because they some of them had some transcripts already embodied in the video. but others didn't. And the ones we focused on, I'll come to that and tell you how we selected which videos and how. They didn't have the transcription, so we had to do it, and we had to code them segment by segment according to the concepts, symbols, emotions, collective histories, spatial reference, and sensory cues. We grouped the codes into cross-cutting themes across testimonies. Home is a sensory landscape, geographies of light, and so on. And then we interpret the testimonies, uh, how they were situated as or shaped by interview, context, time, or archival framing. And I'll show you how we did that. Wait 1 minute. Okay. In here, you can see one of the testimonies coded, for example, in terms of collective social memory. One of the testimonies we coded said that everyone in the camp was chanting, every woman, every child. So that is part of the social memory she recalls. And in manner how we selected, we refer to the website. According to the classification, we selected six. We focused on women, and we selected 6 women that they were uprooted from the same area and moved to the camp called Ain al-Halwa, and that is from the category Ain al-Halwat, called as Ain al-Halwat. And we transcribed them, then we coded them into that manner. So you can see she refers, for example, for the home, how where they are living, that they are living in Ain al-Halwa and they are simple houses. She's explaining the camp resident, the small house she has in the camp. And it goes on, and as the framework continues. So yes. And we found out that home is a spatial sensory word. It is reconstructed as a sequence of concrete spaces that they explained. They say they might narrate how they walk. Uh, uh, they walk even the listeners. When you listen to them, you are in a journey with them. How they are explaining the well, the mosque, the church, the school, every single place they had in their place of origin and what they have now in the camps. These testimonies are really dense, and it took us a really long time to just listen to every single detail. And sometimes they would express the smell of bread, the coffee, the olives, jasmine even, and that applies to the sensory lens and the textures of some stone floors, the soil, the fabrics. And to them, home appears as a thick spatial sensory landscape rather than an abstract category. So because of that structure they have in the space that they had, and then they lost, and then they moved out and to another place that they had to make from scratch. So narratives pivot sharply from ordinary village life to sudden scenes of attack and forced departure. They remember their places of origin, their neighbors even, the roads they passed to reach to the place they settled in. So how they narrate is a journey that you can map somehow. And exile is experienced and remembered as a spatial sequence, a reverse map from village to camp. And they had symbols with them, but the symbols become a portable archive, like keys, deeds, land papers, that they think that they preserve the right to go back some time, uh, and they live with that hope of going back. And they had the songs, the folk tales, the specific season rituals that they practice, and they somehow could reserve and still practice in the camp. So symbols act as portable archive that condense space, emotion, and political claim to the land. And they have the identity, sumud, in the extended exile. So the way they narrate the Nakba is is an ongoing condition, not closed past event. It lives with them, and they have dual attachments to destroyed village and to the camp that they live in. So what ties them to the camp it is actually that they think that it preserves their right to return, but they have the grief emotions, the longing, the pride, and even in those testimonies, sometimes you will find them having some sense of humor and laughing. Uh, so being a Palestinian in exile is performed through remembering and narrating the place across generations. So that Nakba archive is the living infrastructure at the end, and it is a storage, but as well it is a living infrastructure of memory and resilience, and it is of a very important source that I encourage everyone to engage with and look at. Community-based interviews, practices, camp-based teams, the language they use, everyday setting, it shapes the narratives collected. So in the videos, you can see that how they sit is just like how they narrate is just like you are visiting them in a manner. And that digital platform extends these testimonies across time and space. So I couldn't find them in the camps when I collected the data for the former study, but I could find them through the Nakba archive. So it is an infrastructure for sustaining village names, geographies, stories, and these oral history archives are themselves forms of resilient community-driven heritage, not just source of for historian. Um, so these first-generation refugees' testimonies in the Nakba archive reconstruct home as a rich special sensory world that sustains attachment in exile. Displacement is narrated as a geography of rupture and routes, making exile itself a special experience, shaping identity. It's very important that we all the time refer to some symbols, that they act as a portable archives that condense memory, emotion, and claims to land. Treating the Nakba archive as living community-based infrastructure highlights archives themselves as sites of resilience and decolonial heritage work. And we look forward to maybe make some comparative analysis with other oral history collections. That's it. I hope I didn't extend uh, very much.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely actually like so many things. I just kept writing down like furiously. One of the things that really came across to me was this idea of narrating across generations. And I will have a
Yes,
question for you after our next
that's great.
talk, which is by Dr. Deama Khader, who was actually, it's perfect that we are going in this way because I believe that Dr. Khader's work shows when people speak back, right? Across, going back, speaking back to their ancestors. Dr. Khader specializes in cultural heritage preservation and archiving with an emphasis on documenting ephemera. Her presentation, which is based on her dissertation research, is titled Rendering Resistance and Resilience Through Art. Deama, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Anna, and it is a pleasure to be here. Pull this up. Can we see my screen? Okay. So I would like to share my doctoral research findings with you all, starting with a model. This is Shannon's communication model, and he initially made it to describe a phone line communication channel. So a caller sending out a message, and then that message traveling through that channel, but at some point, your phone line, your phone communication is interrupted by a source of noise. And so in his case, that was like static or a garbled message. So the message that reaches the receiver is not exactly the same message that was sent out. And so I was looking at this model, but through the lens of Palestinian art, where the artist is the sender, and then whoever is viewing the artwork is the destination. And in my doctoral work, I was looking specifically at Palestinian artists and then the users being Palestinian archivists. And so within this channel, I was interested in learning more about the noise source. Where in Palestinian art is the noise? And this manifests in several different ways. First, we have just general ephemera. So with street artworks, in their intrinsic nature, they are ephemeral artworks. They're exposed to weathering and being painted over. The message that the street artist is putting out changes over time. We see this mural is riddled with bullet holes. The building is crumbling, and along with it, the mural is as well. Another example, we have this portrait of Leila Khaled, and we see so boldly and legible, "Don't forget the struggle." The same section of the wall, an image taken sometime later, we have another portrait painted right next to Leila. But now the text that once read, "Don't forget the struggle," what we can see says, "Forget the struggle." Just another example of the message changing or altering as it goes through this communication channel. We also experience noise when we are viewing art through social media platforms, which is the way that a lot of us are accessing our information. So here we have this image of a street artwork that might be familiar to some of you. It's a dove with a target on its chest and an olive branch in its beak. And this Instagram user has added the hashtags Lisbon, hashtag visit Portugal, hashtag visit Lisbon. And so from an outsider, they might think that this piece is in Lisbon or in Portugal. But if we zoom out and we get the full context, we see that this mural is actually on the side of the Palestinian Heritage Center in Bethlehem. And so with that added context, we understand that the olive branch in the dove's mouth is not just a peace offering, but it's so much more because of the significance of the olive to Palestinian people and to Palestinian artists, Palestinian audiences. So that's just another way that noise manifests within Palestinian art. And then, of course, we can't speak of, interruption and noise and ephemera without speaking of the destruction, right? So these are some screenshots of Palestinian artists who are living in Gaza and sharing and documenting their destruction of their art studios after bombings in 2023. This is another example of that ephemera erasure into noise. So for my doctoral research, I looked at an expansion of that initial model where Bonici and O'Connor include the elements of author coding. So that's the artist, sorry, how they are coding their messages. Their antecedents here being where they grew up, their background information, authors they like, everything that shapes and forms their opinions and how they are coding a message. What symbolisms are they using, like keys or olive branches? And then on the other end, we have user decoding. How are users decoding and understanding that message through the same tools of their background information, where they're coming from? And we are looking with this model for proximity between the artists and, in this case, the users being archival initiatives based in Palestine and preserving Palestinian cultural works. I added to this model the element of epidata, which we don't have enough time to get into within this short presentation, but essentially epidata is another way to counteract noise by providing contextual information, oftentimes from informal sources. It's information that surrounds a piece, but is not intrinsically a part of the document, the art piece, or whatever information that you're trying to access. For example, it could be a comment on an Instagram post, maybe explaining the significance of a watermelon for someone who doesn't understand, doesn't quite connect or have that proximity or common ground with the person who is sending the message. So in my work, I did a semiotic analysis of 5 Palestinian artworks and looked at the symbolisms within them, as Shahd called them, the portable archives and the symbols of the exile narratives. There's a lot of overlaps, which we'll get into. And I also did a content analysis of the written materials that artists are putting out, their Instagram captions of their works, and then also archival initiatives, what like their mission statements, et cetera, what these Palestinian archival initiatives are deeming important to preserve. And so zooming in here just a little bit. Oh, sorry. I found 4 major themes emerging from these Palestinian artworks, artists, and archival initiatives. And they were resistance and resilience, culture, heritage, and memory, proximity to Palestine, and community knowledge. And some of these were present more so in artist documents. Some of them were present more so in archival documents, but one that was truly pervasive throughout artist and archival documents was, of course, resistance and resilience by and far. And we'll go into some of these codes just a little bit. So this is the parent code, culture, heritage, and memory. And we can see on the right here how many times this was mentioned within captions and publications. We have community knowledge. This code was definitely more prevalent within archival initiatives. So mission statements, about me pages, and so on. Proximity to Palestine is another code that, and this one was most prevalent within artists' captions. So artists were mainly talking about how they are finding proximity to Palestine through their ancestry, or practicing tatreez because it connects them to their ancestors, and practicing this art form is connecting them to a larger identity, a Palestinian identity. And resistance and resilience being the code that was truly enmeshed both in artist descriptions of their work and a core tenet of these Palestinian archives. We can see here for resiliency, the third one down, it was mentioned 29 times, which was the most out of all child codes, was resiliency. And so some examples of resilience in archives. The first two I'll talk about are from the Palestinian Museum's strategic goals and their values. So their very first goal of their archive is to ensure that Palestinian culture is documented and protected and made accessible to enhance or steadfastness under occupation, right? Their main goal is to essentially enhance that steadfastness. Under their values, one of their values is to inspire, right? The inspiration of the Palestinian Museum should be a source of hope for a free Palestinian future. That sense of hope and resiliency is ingrained within this museum's and this archive's goals and values. And then, of course, we have the Fighting Erasure project, which is another archive that I analyzed. And we have this commitment to archive against genocide by providing knowledge, training, resources needed to build capacity and resilience for these Palestinian communities. Again, resilience being a integral component of these archival initiatives based in Palestine. And so here's an example of resiliency of the artists. This is a tatreez artist, and she claims that tatreez takes me to a place where Palestinian joy is abundant, undisrupted, and pure. May we return to our land and experience simple joys once again. We have another tatreez artist who's speaking of in times of witnessing this genocide and these atrocities, that tatreez for her, excuse me, has become more than just a hobby. It transforms into a powerful testament of our resilience and hope. This art form is becoming a testament of resilience. She says, every stitch we make is a tribute to our ancestors' resilience, a symbol of our enduring spirit and a beacon of hope for a brighter future. And then we also have Eyewitness Silwan, which is a collective that does murals in the Silwan neighborhood. And here we have a post where this mural was painted on the side or on the remains of what used to be a two-story building. And they claim that each mural stands as a testament to resilience and a tribute to our cultural heritage amidst the rubble. And I wanted to leave you all with two symbols or two visual artworks that truly embody resilience. And I noticed that both of these, both the olive and the key, Shahd mentioned as these key, the symbols of the exile narratives, right? The key symbols of Palestinians. So just speaking briefly on Sleiman Mansour's Perseverance, we see this twisted, old olive trunk that has been severed, along with two more in the back. But from this trunk that has been brutalized, cut short, destroyed, we have a new, fresh, bright green olive branch with olives sprouting from it, and we have the sun rising in the back, which is a beautiful visual allegory for the Palestinians' continual just resilience in face of erasure, destruction, and struggle. And then we have this mural by Randa Amorameh, which was painted in Amman, Jordan, and we see so many visual symbols within this piece. We have the Tatriz border, the kafiyya, and mainly, most prominently, the key, right? And over the script, or the script over the image, is a Mahmoud Darwish poem, which translates to "I come from there and I have memories." And this piece specifically being situated in Amman, in the diaspora, serves as a beacon of hope to people within the diaspora that they will one day return to Palestine. And that is all I have for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deama. This is absolutely, I mean, so full disclosure here, I was the co-chair on this dissertation, and I do have to, one of the things that I think is important to note is that Deama ended up being having to completely change her data collection method because we are in Texas, and for
She was
some
crazy.
reason, um, it was just impossible to get IRB permission for her to
Yeah,
interview
they
people
did.
via
The
Zoom.
ethics board didn't give her permission to do this.
So, yeah, so just wanted to, mention that because I think that also is I think a lot of us, like Kaitlyn was mentioning, in her community archiving work, are we get put into situations when we're doing this kind of work where we have to be resilient ourselves. So I think all three of the presentations today show both how doing this kind of scholarship, how doing this kind of work, how doing this kind of archiving requires resilience on your own part. I would really love to take some audience questions for our three wonderful presenters. All right, I have, okay. So Tahani has three questions. Two questions to Deama. By considering the noise in Shannon and Weaver's model of communication, were you able to suggest the reason behind the noise? What is the nature behind the noise? Have you thought of the noise as political? And then also thinking of the notion of the pompibset, which Dr. O'Connor also Deema's other co-chair is a big fan of, taking into consideration, especially when presented the slides on Salwan and graffiti. Yeah.
So, excellent questions. Thank you, Tahani. Let's see. So suggesting the reason behind the noise and what is the nature of the noise. I think noise is just an intrinsic part of um, any message that we're sending out. And the noise as political. So absolutely. There are, specifically thinking of social media messages, we have to circumvent algorithms. And so many of my artist captions, they weren't using the word Palestine, they were using P at symbol LES, or they weren't saying Gaza, they were putting G at symbol. So like they're sort of putting noise into their own message to circumvent these political constraints that we're facing. Um, I hope that answers the questions. Yes, the palimpsests, and is particularly relevant with like the slide where we had Leila Khalid, and then Don't Forget the Struggle, and then we had the portrait of Iyad Halak, which we're using the same surface but painting over it and over it. That's sort of intrinsic within graffiti and street artworks, but it's uh, perpetually changing the message and the meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Deama. I have a question for Kaitlyn. As far looking at these, projects, and one of the things that you had mentioned was this idea of, you know, um, creating workflows that are for people, right? To do this type of work. And in your own experience, working with, various students, community archivists, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because that's one of the things that I'm really interested in as, someone who is working with communities of memory workers who are not, trained archivists.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think one of the best sort of tools that I was able to develop for myself was just being a volunteer, um, and going through the process of being trained as a volunteer in a community archive. Um, that was really helpful in helping me see that learning process, of course. Um, and then equally important, I think, is the realization that uh, our strategies, especially in a community context, exist to serve the community, both the community of researchers and the community um, of processors and volunteers and archivists. So if there's something that is not clicking or is not effective, the change comes in the process or the software or the tool and not in the community. Um, and that sort of shift has been really helpful. And especially I think in archives today, when it feels like every week we get a new content management software or we get a new AI tool, and we're all trying to sort of like remain well versed, which is professionally important. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be used by the community, and so its value is based off of uh, that use value. Um, and so I've found that being very adaptive in those workflows has been really helpful, and also putting a lot of emphasis on feedback from students and volunteers as to what they found challenging or what they found confusing or easier ways that they found to do the same type of work. Um, Definitely, I think sort of anchoring it in an understanding of like archival professional standards, like teaching folks what a finding aid is, and why we keep information like provenance or how to use Library of Congress subject headings is helpful, um, because you need to know what the rules are in order to break them. So um, that has also been very helpful of sort of tailoring uh, what I know professionally to what the community will actually use. Also for the sustainability of the project, because your professional presence may not always be there, and so we need to establish workflows that communities can maintain when the master's degree isn't in the room or whatever, um, which more and more often is becoming the case.
Yes, I think everything you just said resonates so much with me. I think I constantly have students panicking because there's so much coming out at them. And then, how do you actually make this material accessible to communities rather than to researchers? Which brings me to a question for Dr. Qzeih. one of the things you said at the end was these archives, they have value not just for historians, they have value for this community, for Palestinians. Can you expand on that and how you see kind of just what do we, I'm someone who has no training in theory regarding, like spatial, like and embodied experiences in the same way that you do. But, I want to, as someone who works in archives and works with archivists, I want to make these like people's history accessible to them. So can you expand on that and talk about like, what do we do? What recommendations do you have?
Well, actually, the issue is that about the importance of having these archives is that the is that it they are there to preserve a story tale, let's say. And when the time passes and nobody expected that much time to pass and the states and everything is those people remain as refugees and even got buried in different lands, having still the hope and desire to go back to their countries and even uh, live the rest of their lives there. So, and with those people vanishing from the timeline, because most of them died, uh, approaching even let's say 80 years of displacement, so we don't have them anymore. So having this archive preserves the tale, the story, and specifically from people who lived it. We as Palestinians, people who live in the refugee camps, they narrate the stories to their grandchildren even, and generation to generation, these stories were passed. But it's never like you hear them from the people who lived them actually. And having that initiative, I mean, the Nakba Archive, which is a grassroots, it started because people, the people who collected these testimonies thought they're really important and they don't exist in any other place. And we now look at them with a different eye, a valuable, a very valuable eye. And what I can now get benefit of that, even I mean, theoretically, yes, you can test the theory through with this lens of theory. You can test the testimonies. You can test your theories. I mean, with the testimonies and having these shifting grounds now in the Palestinian society, politically, I mean, uh, also needs another recording lens that uh, maybe we heard lots of initiatives and the presentations. Different people try to record stories of people, things that happen now, and I believe it's of a very important thing to do. Having those many shifts on the ground now that you cannot keep up with. Today you have that thing, tomorrow you will have another thing, and the attention is shift to the new thing, and we totally forget about the previous day, and we totally lose it. And that's really disappointing, and sometimes we lose that very specific part of history, which leads us to what we are having now. So when we are trying to look back and we are trying to analyze why did that happen, we might not find the reasons why. And that is, I believe, a very important thing that the archives do, is that they preserve the story.
Thank you so much. And Tahani says, my grandfather's testimony is preserved in the Nakba archive. It's living proof to the importance, especially to the younger generations.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and Tahani has also published books on, documenting her grandparents. So and their experiences with the Nakba. I am so thankful to all of everyone who participated to these incredible panelists today. What you had just said, Shahad, it reminds me of one of our keynote speakers this morning. Dr. Rana said, preservation is not only a luxury, it's no longer a luxury, it's an ethical responsibility. And I think that is something that's going to really, really stick with me. Do we have any last minute questions? And yes, that our interpreters were incredible. I want to hand it over to Dr. Khader because I just realized it's 57. It's 7:57 in Jerusalem. We need to.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Shahd and Kaitlyn and Deama. Thank you, everybody, so much. That's really it for us. This is the closing panel and the closing 2 minutes of the Resilient Communities Conference. What epic 3 days. Oh my God. Really, I'm just in awe and so proud of the incredible work that was on showcase here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the chairs and all the organizers and all the sponsors and all the speakers. Thank you so much. And definitely those, thank you, Henria. Definitely those on this side of the Atlantic. It's quite late on a Sunday, so thank you for sticking with us.